Hello and welcome to The Deepest Dive from MinnMax. I'm Ben Hansen, joined by Cyril Vasquez.
Hi.
Jeff Marchiafava.
We're doing it.
And Kyle Hilliard.
Oh, I got my last name in there.
That's right. It's being done right now. Cyril Vasquez, what is The Deepest Dive?
The Deepest Dive is similar to an old show we used to do called Game Club.
I'd argue it's similar to the broader concept of a game club,
that's
but
true.
Please go on.
Where we basically all play through a game in sections, and we talk about our experiences with it and try to have, we all of us have notes, I imagine, and we try to go as deep as we can in talking about very specific moments, characters we like, beats we were into, and kind of just gameplay systems in general.
Yeah, I want to know all the beats that you're into these days, Cyril. We also are going to be taking so many pieces of feedback from the community, from the MinnMax community. If you're wondering, hey, where are all these comments coming from? It's coming from the MinnMax Patreon, which you can find at patreon.com/MinnMax, 2 N's.
2 N's.
And in that, if you support us on any level, like the $2 level is the minimum, $7.50 is the maximum. Look, the rest is your call.
Hey.
But if you support us at any level, we make a post in there, and then people leave comments with their thoughts on the game. The more specific, the better. So we have so many great comments. Thank you so much, everybody, for writing in.
Yeah, which is exciting because we didn't know how many things we would get, and it would really suck if it was just 2 hours of us talking and then we had like one email
Yeah,
from people.
but instead it's going to be 2 hours of me reading and doing different voices for every person in the community.
Accents?
Also,
Offensive accents?
Oh, I'm just going to guess the offensive accents.
Is that a goal for us? Is just Hansen, we'll hit this level on the Patreon and Hansen will do offensive accents?
That's right. So this is a video version. We should point out that if you want to listen to this, it is technically possible. If you are a $5 supporter for the Patreon, which everybody knows is patreon.com/MinnMax, 2 N's. Now, don't actually write out 2 N's, although we should probably take that domain now that I think about it. But anyways, if you're a $5 supporter, you get access to the exclusive shows and also the exclusive audio feed. So you can listen to this in your favorite podcast app if you prefer that way, if you're a $5 supporter, which of course we'd appreciate it as well. In this episode, we are not going to spoil anything past the concept of landing on Monarch. I think roughly where we should be at as a group is the ship lands on Monarch, you then dive for the power button and shut off your system that you're playing the Outer Worlds on.
Any erase your save file.
That's right.
I mean, my stopping point was actually, like, I had the mission. It's like, go to Monarch.
Okay, that's great too.
And, like, I
Everything's
completed
great.
everything. I just didn't get on the ship.
That's wonderful.
Okay.
So, The Outer Worlds from Obsidian. This is exciting to finally dive into. Let's see. The most boring thing out of the gate. What's everybody playing on?
Xbox One X.
Okay.
Also Xbox One X, yes.
Okay.
PC.
Yeah. Oh,
Game Pass, baby.
I was playing on a base level PS4, but as we'll dive into, I'm going to be restarting on PC. Not for technical reasons, but for a million very private, personal reasons.
Yeah. So how is it on PS4? Is it?
It's solid so far. Like there's cloud textures are pretty rough. It feels like at this point in the console life, it's like, it just feels like playing a PC game on minimum specs, but a lot less buggy than I was expecting. Although, hey, Kyle,
Yes.
you remind me.
I?
Camden wrote in saying, hey, gang, I've heard from most people the game is relatively glitch-free, but my copy on the base PS4 has a game-wide audio bug. This is the kind of specificity we want for deepest dives out of the gate, talking about one bug, where everything except dialogue sounds like it's happening inside a can or coming out of a very bad speaker.
Oh, no.
I haven't found anything online about it, so I'll probably have to reinstall the game and see if that works. Have y'all run into any bugs?
Are we sure that that's not his speakers on his TV? That can't be, right? I mean,
Camden, please record what it sounds like and send it to us. Have you guys run into anything too bad?
No. The only thing I ran into was I've gotten stuck a couple times jumping where I shouldn't be, but you can just you can just fast travel out of it basically. So no crashes or any weird stuff.
I've had the one, I guess, it's a nice thing to say, but I think the closest thing I've had to a bug is there's been 1 or 2 conversations where I go, you get the camera zooming in on the person's face and they just stand there for up to 7 seconds and we're just making eye contact and then they'll be like, hey, how's it going? So but that's not even, that doesn't bother me really.
You can still role play it like they're looking at your costume, should I comment on his armor or not? Yeah. That whole thing.
So that's not too bad at all.
Sure.
I haven't really had anything major.
Yeah. Old Scotland wrote in saying, I'm playing on an original Xbox One, and man, those load times are slow. That is something on the base PS4. I mean, it is rough. That's one of the reasons I want to start over on PC as well, is just to get that sweet load time. How's it running for you, sir?
It's running okay. It definitely feels like it my CPU feels like the bottleneck, where you're seeing, especially in like the wide open areas, you're seeing like some very consistent frame rate, but it's nothing crazy.
Yeah.
At low times, I have not noticed like
really
too much. Like it doesn't feel like, oh, gosh, I've been here for a while. So definitely, like I like that part. I feel like 60 is not, it's not hitting 60 consistently, but I don't want to run in at 30, but I don't know. It seems to be doing okay.
Right on. Let's get into something juicier here because we have so many specific points of feedback. A couple of big themes came up in all the feedback. And so if we don't read your specific comment, I'm sorry, but I think somebody else also hit it, and we don't want to read every single one and make this too boring. But okay, let's see. I'm trying to remember. The overall biggest themes are people effing love this game and people love Parvati. Like, it is a 1-2 punch of like, I love these two things. It is so specific. So there's a lot to get into, but Mark E. Mangerson, which must be made up, he says, hey, my expectations for this game were immediately destroyed when the escape pod landed on the guy who I assumed would be the first companion. Did anything else you have seen so far in the Outer Worlds go a different way than you thought? Pretty broad question. What do you guys think?
Yeah, first of all, like that moment stood out to me too of just like, I like the humor in it. Like there are a lot of dumb puns in this game, but then there's just kind of interesting twists and things like that where it's like, oh, this is more clever than I was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
And that was just one of those kind of things of like, okay, I'm going down to this plant to meet this guy, and then it's like, no, he was an idiot who like turned on the locator beacon and then just stood there with it in his hand, and you came down and crushed him.
Yeah, and that's one of the craziest things because I went on the cover story trip with Game Informer to visit Obsidian and spend 2 days learning about this game, and I think that was the biggest concern I had was like, the description of the world is very funny when you're literally talking to the writers and you know the two creative directors, Tim Kaine and Letterman Boyarsky. And I was just like, I don't know how this is going to come across in the game. Is it going to be obnoxious? Am I going to get it? And I'm so happy that judging from everybody's feedback, it's like they love the tone, they love the humor. Like it's not too obnoxious, but it's an interesting effed up world that people really sink their teeth into.
And it's also like, it seems like it would be very similar to Fallout too, because Fallout kind of had like that, you know, wackiness to it, and like, hey, we're doing something different, you know, with like alternate history and stuff like that. But I do like that they really drilled down on the concept of what if, you know, the entire, you know, the worlds, everything was controlled by corporations, and like how would that twist into like these weird situations and stuff. I don't think that they say it anywhere in the game that I know of yet, but the backstory is, and I'm curious if you guys picked up on this or even thought about it, was that this is an alternate timeline from our universe, and it split at the point, this is according to the developers, it split at the point around Einstein. So like 1905 or around like Einstein's first big discoveries, special relativity, I guess. Good boy. Was so I was like, oh, a World War I happened, but it was different, and so that's how the lore of Obsidian sees the branching timeline. But then, hey, it turns out corporations are going to rise up no matter what.
Yeah, I do. It is a surprise when I'm reminded that this is like Earth is a thing that exists. Like someone mentioned Earth, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is like our universe. And then the other thing that I early on had to remind myself about is, you know, it's hard not to think of Fallout playing this game. But there was a moment early on where I think her name is Zoe, and she's talking about how much she likes the serials and like watching TV. And I was like, oh, it's weird that they have TV in this world. And it's like, oh, wait, this is not a post-apocalypse. That first area at least sort of felt so disheveled and stuff that I was like, wait, I had to like remind myself that this isn't a post-apocalypse. Like people still have TV and normal jobs and electricity and stuff
they
like that.
They need that electricity.
It turns out a big deal.
I mean, I generally am liking it. Like at first in the first couple hours, there was a little bit where I had like the tone seemed a little overwhelming, where it felt like almost idiocracy levels of like everyone is kind of completely bought into, you know, the corporate spiel.
Welcome to Costco, I love you. Kind of thing, right?
Kind of stuff. And then like, so it felt a little bit like abrasive of like, okay, none of these people recognize what is like how messed up this is, where they're like, you meet that person very early on. I think he's like the first person you meet after you find Alex's corpse, where he's trying to give you the company line, and he's like, oh, I nailed it. And it felt like it set like a weird precedent. Is like, is the whole game going to be like this? Because I don't know that I can handle 30 hours of this. But like later on, you eventually start meeting people who like, I think the first person that I encountered was a guy named Jameson, who's in one of the later quests, who's like, no, that guy's completely self-interested. This whole thing sucks. I'm out of here. Like he's not interested in that at all. So I hope it very early on starts peeling back the layers of like the facade that it presents very clearly up front.
But it's just like, it's the fact that Terra 2 and Spacious Choice, like Spacious Choice has such a dominating presence, which becomes important for the storyline for that specific planet.
Yeah.
So that's why they hit it so hard. Let's dive into this thing. Michael Newman says, I'd say the thing that stuck out to me most was the efforts put in the world building. Within the first 5 minutes, you're introduced to the man in the cave who works for Spacer's Choice. After a little while, you hear the Spacer's Choice jingle, a 50s era advertisement earworm that seems like a nice touch. Shortly after that, as you're taking the elevator up to Reed's office, you hear a familiar sound, and then it clicks that it's elevator music rendition of the jingle. A while later, after exploring all that Terra 2 has to offer, you inevitably come across a music box or two. As your cursor moves over the item, you are yet again treated to a third rendition of the jingle music. This is such a seemingly small detail that it really developed the world for me. It made Spacious Choice feel like a propaganda machine, and that the dialogue you have with the Emerald Vale townsfolk would lead you to believe. Yeah, for sure. Somebody else, let me see if I can find that.
That is a really clever touch. Although, like, I don't know. I feel like the more I heard it, that Spacer's Choice thing, I was like, do people think that's a good tagline in this world? It's just like, it's not the best choice. Yeah. It definitely feels like I had a hard time like suspending my disbelief of people thinking like even the Spacer's Choice people being like, that's a solid, like even the dystopic like world that they live in, it feels like, I don't know that I would buy that as a good tagline for something.
The joke of it was more important to them than it being like a real.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you're saying.
Like, do PR people just suck that much in the future that they can't figure out?
Yeah.
There were a couple taglines like that. Where it's like, oh man, like.
I do like, speaking of world building and tone, I like that you get an opportunity to discuss like detailed things with everybody. Like it's moving forward a little bit, but you learn about like diet toothpaste. And like, which is such a goofy, weird, clever idea. And I like the idea. I like that I had the opportunity to talk to a character at length about like diet toothpaste.
Yeah.
Like that's so weird and doesn't make sense. And I like that even, like I liked having a conversation of someone like acknowledging like, yeah, we made diet toothpaste. Here's why it works. Let me go into detail with it for you, you know?
Yeah,
Kevin Copson wrote in saying, my favorite message so far is from an Auntie Cleo terminal during the mission to recover the diet toothpaste research. Quote, we've uncovered something quite fascinating. While the toothpaste does reduce cavities, it only does so nominally more than the current version. Our results were skewed by the fact that our test subjects had a marked decrease in appetite and hence were eating much less. This is such little detail but makes the world feel so much more believable. I love that one of the writers sat down to think about how the process of diet toothpaste research might have gone.
And how it could also be an explosive. It's like just another little detail that's cool.
Trevor Corbin hit the nail on the head here. Saying, hey, the writing and dialogue in the game has been so enjoyable. It is the exact sci-fi humor / Futurama writing I expected. And like you talk about the realism and like the PR people, are they so bad? And it's like, it's just Futurama, everybody. Like that's all we're dealing with here.
There's a weird mix of disciplines where there's a lot of puns. There's a lot of like the name of this thing is kind of clever, but then also things like in the early town, you meet the thing where like you're trying to collect people's like fees for having died, like the gravestone fees, and one of them like basically pays for someone else. And they're like, because I was the closest living relative. And you're like, wait, you're related to them? It's like, no, I was the closest living person relative to their body. Like, I think that was like maybe my favorite joke that I encountered so far.
Blake Probst writing, the capitalistic universe in the Outer Worlds is like a Bezos wet dream. It's gross, disgusting, and terrible all around. Yet I cannot stop thinking about it and wanting to play it even more. Your gravesite is a rental? He says.
Yeah, and things of like, and I think it kind of works in layers where it's like, oh, this is screwed up. And then you'll come across another detail like that of like, oh, sick pay is the amount that you pay to the corporation when you're out sick. And you just kind of keep digging deeper and deeper and being like, oh, this is really screwed up.
And it's interesting that everyone just sort of that takes it at face value. Like, this is normal. It's like us in the United States in medical care.
And there's the thing where like suicide is a tragedy
illegal,
because
right?
it's illegal because it like the people are treated as company property.
Damages company property. Yeah, that's such a good touch. Jordan Turner says the game feels like a parody, feels less like a parody, more like a prophecy. I don't want to get too political. Here we go. But he says, unchecked capitalism is a truly scary thing. I chose to reroute the power to the deserters and I encountered what I feel is the moral main dilemma of the game. Is physical security, employment, and a guaranteed way of life worth your freedom, or is freedom worth more than having a job, a home, and food to eat? Two very different and valid arguments. I love it. The whole capitalism thing. Obviously, the most obvious thing in the world, and it's very bizarre, is that idea that as Obsidian's making a game about the perils of giant corporations, they're purchased by Microsoft. Literally one of the biggest companies in the world.
In Outer Worlds 2, like, corporations are going to be the heroes that save everybody.
Yeah.
Well, it's very funny because there's a lot of different areas to go, but they actually mentioned the cover story trip that like where we'd want to go for the sequel is like there's other colonies out there, and they floated one of the ideas they were toying with was the idea of a rich person, quote, like Bill Gates. They're like, what if someone
Bates?
Yeah, someone just bought an entire solar system. And it'd be a little bit more like Andrew Ryan, I guess, where it's all under the control of like one rich person, which I think is an awesome area. And I hope they go there either for DLC or for the sequel.
That's a little Borderlands 2, right? Isn't it? Handsome Jack?
I guess it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wait, you know what? Maybe they won't do it. Yeah. Also, just from that cover story trip, because we talked to them about, here's this hot button. How political do you want to get with this game? What are you trying to say about capitalism? And they're like, I remember both Tim and Leonard were like, look, we know that saying, hey, corporations are bad is a little bit high school philosophy. Like, we want to think we're above that. And then Leonard Boyarsky, just so you know where they're coming from, like, sincerely, he was like, honestly, I love capitalism. And then Tim Kane's like, yes, please buy our game. So don't think that they're like, crazy, they're really trying to hammer home this political message. I think they're much more interested in the absurdity and what's one of the silliest things they can do. Obviously, it's going to have some messaging about capitalism and everything like that, but it's nice that they're not trying to hit you over the head with it.
Even in the intro, like, I feel like they kind of very subtly insert like the idea of like the only reason anyone's out in space anyway isn't because like, oh yeah, mankind just naturally kind of expanded to the stars. It's like, no, corporations saw it in their best interests to do so. And like the flyer says like, hey, you can have a home, a better life, and you can be out in space if you buy into it. Like the only way you're leaving the planet is if you do it through a corporation, right? And it's like if you become an indentured servant effectively to a corporation, and that's sort of like this weird thing where everyone has bought into it because it was the only option, right? Like if you're going to be so like tied to a corporation as part of the fact that you're outside of the solar system, then you may as well just become a total like, buy into it completely to that extent, right?
Yeah, for sure. Justin Burnside, this is the first game to really make me question my own choices. On Emerald Vale, I was completely ready to backstab Thompson and reroute the power to the deserters' camp. But once it came down to directing the power to one or the other, Parvati gave me a piece and shed light on the poor workers that'd be affected by my choice. This is the first time in a long time that I can remember actually having to dwell on a video game choice. However, I still directed power to the deserters because F capitalism. All right, Justin, relax, buddy.
They did do a good job in that moment. Like right when you're about to flip that switch, like she really lays it on thick about, how nice all these people are and they're really just trying their best. And it gave me the same kind of pause. And I think it's interesting that they kind of follow through with that too in interesting ways, where I also rerouted it to the deserters, and then I went back and talked to the main lady who was in charge, who seems like a very nice person. And then just during that conversation, she was just kind of like, oh yeah, I suspect a lot of people are going to be showing up. We're not going to let them in because we have to keep our settlement pure.
Oh,
and I was
really?
like,
what
did I do?
She's a no good. My strategy with that is I was going back and forth, and I'm trying to play this game, in this playthrough at least, of trying to role play like I am just a little bit confused. Like, yeah, if I just woke up and it's like, oh, these corporations, blah, blah, blah. It's like, it's just kind of disinterested of like, what is this? Okay, yeah, sure, you seem fine. It was kind of the role play I was going for, right? And so at a certain point, going back between Reed and her and back and forth, eventually I just got to the point when she said, oh, hang on, I'll pull this up. Anyways, but she said that idea that like, oh, we're growing our gardens based on human corpses. They're the best fertilizer. And it's like, okay, so she's not so great. And then at a certain point, I'm like, all right, lady, you gotta go, and just killed her. And then went back to Reed. Yeah, and it's like, all right, thank you
shot her? Like,
yeah.
Oh wow.
Just beat the crap out of her, maybe with like a sword, I forget, but like in that basement area, and it's just crazy because then her companions who are like out around the fire, they chase after you. And so I just ran all the way back to the town,
cool.
like, Reed, help!
Did anything come of that story-wise? Did they just say like, was that you basically siding with the town, or like
siding with the corporation? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was basically it.
So you sided with the corporation.
Yes, why?
So wait, so you're okay. So then, in this situation where there's a splinter group from a major, corporate-owned entity that is trying to start their own thing, separate from the company that they split off from.
Yes,
you sided with the company from which that entity split off.
I don't understand why this is confusing. Yes, I love corporations.
It just seems like kind of familiar, but whatever. The thing that like. I went back and did it, but like I'd heard about how it goes if you side with the corporation. Basically, what ends up happening is that like the people, like all those people end up moving back into the town, and they kind of leave behind a plaque that says like "Never dream" or whatever. Never imagine like leaving leaving the settlement, right? So you basically crush all of those people's dreams of ever splitting up from the corporation. So I also sided with the settlement, and having seen it gone both ways, it definitely feel like a choice where they wanted to make you feel better. Like both, you're kind of regretting either choice, which is I think is at first it feels like it's a nice little like breakaway from the idea of like, okay, you have these two options, they both feel bad, but there's this like what is almost universally agreed upon to be like the good option of like, oh, let's find a place in the middle where we meet, and that'll be the thing that everyone wants to go to. Like if you have like enough intellect or something like that, if you find an extra option. But I like that this is kind of forcing you to choose like the better of two evils.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting that it's like right there at front too.
Right.
Like this is what you're in for.
Yeah. And that there isn't like a compromise choice of like, okay, these are the choices that I don't want to have to choose between, but then you find like the option. I was like, okay, thank God I didn't have to actually make that choice. I can just find this thing that kind of circumvents that. That said, like if every choice is like this, where the whole game is like kind of this weird bummer, that would be a little like draining if you went through that entire game making a series of choices where you're like, I don't know, like where you felt bad about every single choice. It might be a little overwhelming.
Do you know that there is a compromise choice?
I guess there is. There is.
So Mike Sweet says one of the hardest choices I had to make. I ended up compromising and helping both sides, but I feel like I made the wrong choice. I love the Outer Worlds so much because of the diversity of options of finishing a quest. Coming into work on Friday to talk about which faction my coworkers and I diverted geothermal power to is such a fun conversation to have. I was able to divert the power to Edgewater, found out that I could work a truce between Adelaide and Reed, which then led me to a speech check where I told Reed to leave town and bring the deserters back to Edgewater. The most interesting detail was that by doing a side quest for Silas, the gravedigger, I could drop his name to Adelaide to have an ally for creating fertilizer. I love this quest line so much. Starts the game off very strong. P.S. Shout out to my robot buddy Jeremy. Losing him in the thermal plant was like Peepo and Overblood all over again.
I actually, when I played through that, Jeremy says that he'll help you like track down all the things. I told him to just stay there, and I went out and shot all the robots myself because I was like, I don't want Jeremy to get shot.
I don't think I even found Jeremy. So, this was very weird.
Wait, can he stick with you as like a...
No, he just kind of stays in the factory. Yes.
Where do you find Jeremy?
He's just in the factory.
Yeah, he was in the backyard area, kind of patrolling around there, and so someone sends you there to kill him, basically, but you can actually just reprogram him.
Yeah,
that's
crazy
right. That's the robot
guy.
that Parvati names, right?
Yeah.
And then you repair him, right?
Yeah. But getting back to that choice, that is an interesting thing. And I read up about the choice after I made it because I was feeling like, man, did I just like screw that up? Because I wasn't happy with which is cool that, it had kind of these unintended consequences. And I thought I was doing the right thing. But I did read that there are additional kind of ways that it branches off where you can kind of boot out that guy and have her kind of take over.
But then you realize that she's bad. But I love the idea of replacing her fertilizer. It's like there's a solution for everything. Mm-hmm. It's just absurd. Dan Willie says, I found myself surprised at the relatively black and white nature of the major decisions I've made in the game so far, especially coming off recent RPGs that tend to dwell in gray areas like The Witcher. I've actually found this refreshing. I like being able to better forecast what consequences my choices will produce, and it invokes the nostalgia of games like KOTOR. What do you think about the bad corporations versus rebels morality system? I don't think it's as black as white as Dan is leading us to believe.
I feel like I think
Dan's full of it, frankly.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I personally like it when your choices have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
I like it when it doesn't feel like, oh, I know what I'm doing like the entire time, and there are just like I like that when a game teaches you the lesson that like your actions have unintended consequences, which is more realistic to me. But I guess so far I found them very extreme, not necessarily black and white, where it's like either you're on one end of the spectrum, you're totally with the corporations, or you're totally with the rebels so far. And it feels like I think so far I feel like that's been the most major choice so far is the town choice. But I don't necessarily think it is a thing where you're like, here's the unequivocal good choice and here's the ass choice. Although there are a lot of choices in that game where it's like, yeah, I'll do the thing where I'm helping you out, or I'm just going to be a huge jerk about it in the dialogue. But in terms of like the big moral choices, I feel like they're extreme, but not black and white, I think.
Yeah, I can see how he may have come to that conclusion based on your playthrough, and just kind of the things that you saw leading up to those kind of things. But I think he'll probably end up finding more nuance.
I think so too. Sam Evans says, I really enjoy the freedom of the game so far. As soon as I saw the locked door in Reed's room, I immediately killed him and the guards to get inside.
Jeez.
Parvati was upset with me, but she soon was laughing as we fought our way out of Edgewater. That's nice that she comes around apparently on that.
When she gives you that speech before you make the choice, like I was all in. This might surprise you guys, but I'm not really a big fan of corporations at the moment. So I was really eager to screw the corporation, but I was very worried if I made that choice that she was going to leave.
Yeah,
and so that was actually more like I tried to be very reasonable with her. I was like, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. I'm taking it all in. I'm going to give it to the rebels.
Yeah. Robert Marquardt says, it's a lovely game so far, and I felt right at home from the moment the characters started being revealed and the choices became immediately uncertain. The first I felt especially challenging was back in Edgewater when deciding to give the medicine to Abernathy or Esther. My first and emotional response was obviously Abernathy. He was a sick old man in a corporate world where they only valued the healthy and those who could work. Esther immediately made me rethink my choice when she said she was a hypochondriac. Should I waste needed medicine on someone who might just think he's afflicted when the town really could use those meds? Which way did you guys go for? Personally, I chose Esther as I thought it was doing the most good. Then again, I kind of sort of doomed the same colony when I gave power to the deserters, so I don't know what's going on.
I also I sold it to Esther, and I went and talked to Abernathy right afterward, and I just felt like just awful.
Oh, really?
And I was like,
why would you go talk to him?
I regretted it immediately because he was just like, well, you killed me. Thanks. And I was like, okay, bye. Like it was rough. Yeah.
It's also weird because like as soon as I don't know if it's after you make the choice or before, but I think she tells you, Esther, that like, oh yeah, I'm basically like insuring someone from the insurance people. Like I'm somehow responsible for like.
She's an actuary. I think
she's an actuary. So I'm the person in charge of keeping track of this stuff. So it felt like the corporate choice, but it also felt like. Well, this feels like the choice that's going to help the most people, but also...
Well, she also said she was going like around her job responsibilities, which was enough for me to be like, yeah, you're cool.
Yeah. Trace Levos says, I'm impressed at how quickly the developers threw me into a world of total moral ambiguity. Phineas is my savior, but what's his motive? He's immediately acting shady and shooting me down to a foreign planet with little explanation. Reed Thompson automatically seems seedy, but as you get to know him more, you think maybe he's not that bad. And Adelaide... seems like such a friendly Grammy until you find out she's grinding up human corpses. What do you guys think about Phineas?
Yeah, it's not clear. And the one thing that struck me the most about him is that there are points where you can turn him in, or at least that dialogue option comes up, and I didn't choose it, but I'd be really interested to see what happens if you... It's interesting that it appears that you can just throw him under the bus as soon as that happens.
Yeah, Richard says, almost immediately after landing on Groundbreaker, you have the option to completely subvert what is presented as the main quest line by turning Wells into the board. The drastic narrative turns that are under your control are truly awesome. Yeah, that is the craziest thing to me, is just like how much it changes your feeling when you're playing a game like this. Just that idea that I remember, visiting Yu Suzuki in the Shenmue 3 studio recently. He made some point of like, I want to have multiple ways to do everything in Shenmue 3, because if there's only one way to do it, then the second you find out what to do, you shut your brain off. And he's like, I think it's important to have your brain always be active. And I think this game does such a beautiful job of that, right? Of just, if there's so many options and you feel so empowered as the player, it's like, I really need to pay attention because the game is respecting my time. Yeah. And so it deserves my respect as well, right?
But that is specifically like, a part of me was tempted to turn him in as soon as I got that option. But it did feel like a thing where, okay, if I do this, am I botching my playthrough? It's like in Far Cry 4, right, where you can just kind of stay there in the beginning and like you get like, well, why don't you just do this, right? Like the weird kind of like closing that logic, that logic loop. But your playthrough ends up being 20 minutes, right? So I'm curious to see if that's what ends up happening, but I am tempted to do it anyway.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, do you guys, because you said you looked up things afterward, like is that what you guys have all been doing? Because I'm very much like,
no, I'm
purely
fine.
Emotional. Yeah. I don't want to know the other options. I want to make my decision and go with it. And then like I don't really want to know what I missed, because then it screws up the story to me. Then it becomes more of a video game and less of a narrative that I'm in control of.
It was just that one thing, and I stumbled upon it after I made the decision when I was looking up something else.
I had to Google what is the Groundbreaker, because talking to people who had played it, it's like, okay, we're to stop for the first thing for the first game club discussion, and they're like, oh, stop after you leave the Groundbreaker, do all the quests there, and then go to Monarch. And I was like, Groundbreaker, like the ship's called the Unreliable. What are you talking about? And then they'll look it up and be like, oh, I didn't do any of this. Like, I am at
so that's how
Monarch.
you saw.
I've never
Okay.
seen Groundbreaker. I only have Pravarti as my companion.
How did you not go to Groundbreaker?
I don't know. I didn't follow.
Wait, you went from the opening planet to Monarch?
Yes. But they made it
wow.
clear, like,
Okay.
when you land on Monarch, it's going to be an S show, and it's going to be really hard, and there might be a better place to land. And I went through dialogue options, and it's like, oh, I guess there's not. Let's go.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, and so, everybody keeps talking about all these characters, and, like, on Giant Bomb,
man.
they talked about how many characters you get out of the gate, and I was like, I'm at one. What are you talking about?
Yeah, you ended up skipping a ton of stuff. And there is another interesting part kind of showing like how much it branches, where when you're on Groundbreaker, if you go there,
And this is a ship?
yeah. It's
You
a giant
play the
space
game
station.
normally.
It's a giant space station that ended up taking as long as the first planet did for me, because
Really?
because I went
for
through
sure.
I went through the entire planet. I was trying to do pretty much everything, and I was kind of doing that with the intention of thinking like, okay, well, once I leave the planet, I'm going to Monarch, and I should be caught up. And then I found out that there's an entire space station with all these other missions, and I was like, oh crap, I'm way behind.
Yeah.
But when you're on Groundbreaker, you eventually need to get like a nav key card to go to the next place, and there's a lady there who will sell it to you for $10,000. And I already had that much money, but she said, if you don't have the money, you could go to this other place, and like you could, if you find some secret stuff, you could sell it to me, and I'll like give you a discount or whatever.
Oh, sure.
And so I ended up doing that anyway, and it turns out that takes you to another huge place with all of these other missions.
Really?
And I was like this close to completely missing that.
That's
I was
the
like,
diet- that's
holy
the
cow.
diet
You went back
toothpaste
to
zone.
Terra too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
That's
It's like
the, when you're trying to get
Rose
all
Garden or something
Yeah.
like that.
That's
yeah.
where you find the diet toothpaste, and you find that one criminal lady.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, like that whole space station, I think is like an interesting like mirror to Spacer's Choice, or like the corporations, where it's like we are a powerful like separate entity that the corporations rely on for like shipping and stuff. Like they basically have to run through us if they want to basically do much in the system, but we kind of hate each other, so there's like a lot of tension between these two factions. So I think one of my favorite moments so far was just walking through that first gate where they're like, all right, you're all good to go, like you can walk in, and you walk in, it's like this sort of BioShock-esque like sea of like neon signs, and you see like that was like what felt like the game opening up and telling me like, oh, it's not just going to be a series of planets. It feels like you are empowered to like kind of craft your own destiny in a lot of ways, and that was like a really interesting moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd really
Yeah.
love it there, Hanson. It's beautiful.
Well, Zextherium says there's two specific things I absolutely love about the game. One is the fact that the logo in the main menu aligns with the ship. Cool. And two, which is by far more of an impact to me, the first time I opened the door to Groundbreaker's main hub, it came out of nowhere. It looked like a normal middle door, but when it opened, it revealed a neon hub that had a beautiful atmosphere, and I absolutely loved it.
Did he rip me off?
Did you rub my lamp? So in, let's see, Birkin in Minnesota says, Groundbreaker feels like Mass Effect Citadel by way of the density and endless creativity of Mario Odyssey.
Okay.
Hang on, I'm trying to remember. Imagine what this place is like. So it's like Mario Odyssey meets the Citadel?
Citadel, yes.
Citadel, Mario Odyssey, I don't know.
Okay.
It was weird when I found a bunch of like moons that I could just like grab off the ground, and it's
There's also
There is that moon guy.
and then my character did like the jump where he was like,
true.
yeah.
There's also a full city where you're half the height of every other character.
Yeah. Wait, I thought there were no romance options. You can't get married in this one. So few highlights from Birkin saying a shop tender with an over-the-top costume and over-the-top anxieties to match was a real thrill.
Yeah,
a
the moon guy.
Yeah, a sewage manager turned gang boss who openly specializes in, quote, persuasive acquisitions, to use the phrasing her lawyers have asked her to use, yet recoils an offense when you dare to use the word criminal. And a mustachioed ambassador, like Mario.
It is like Odyssey. I'm sorry.
Who can lead on about your willingness to turn in a wanted outlaw only to watch his hopes deflate as you suddenly devolve into coy idiocy. Oh, you asked if I knew wells? I mean smells. It really smells in here. So that's
Did you guys talk to that guy with the moon head?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because eventually I kept asking him about his mask because I really wanted to get one of those masks, and he was like, one of the dialogue options is like, so what's it like in there? And that was like the first time he broke the side. He's like, you don't want to know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Stop
That's
asking.
great.
Aaron Bivens says, my favorite NPC so far is Martin, the Spacer's Choice shopkeeper on the Groundbreaker. The amount of dialogue about him wearing the moon helmet is great. and then you get extra dialogue by buying one yourself and talking to him again.
Oh.
Then, if you go to a public terminal and read his emails, you get another dialogue prompt. The attention to detail on dialogue has been absolutely amazing.
Wait, real quick, Cyril, did you not try to just buy it?
Well,
like you were like, you know what? I'm not going to buy this. I'm just going to convince you.
The weird thing was that like I don't know if it was like another joke because like you go into the menu, you can buy and sell from him.
Yeah.
But he has like the same object for different prices. So it's like
weird.
you go in and you look at like the gear and there's like a ton of those like moon heads, but they're all different prices. So I ended up like, wait, am I missing something here? Is one of these objects better than the other, or is this a joke where like he's selling the same object for different prices? So I ended up not buying one because I was like, I don't know which one is the correct one to buy. I probably should have just bought any of them. At some point, I had so many credits.
And the stat bonus on those is it improves your lying ability.
Oh,
too,
that's
which is
amazing.
interesting.
That's smart.
But I wanted to say that with the terminal thing, I have been impressed by, like all these games always have little notes and stuff that you can find everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting how they tie into characters that are actually in the world and kind of flesh them out. And the Martin one is like he's just writing back to his mom, like on his old planet. And he's like, yeah, I'm lonely here, but I'm doing my best to kind of move up in the world and stuff like that. And then with the ambassador guy, if you go through your ship logs, because he knew Alex Hawthorne, the guy that you murdered,
right?
And he like they kind of have them split between the ambassador's emails, and then you can read the sent emails that Alex, sent back to him.
Yeah.
But like the ones that the ambassador sent make it seem like you're his best friend, and it's like, oh, I can't wait to see you again. And then there's only like one that Alex Hawthorne finally sent back where he's like, yeah, I was out in space. Like, you're sending me too many emails. Like, I'll get there when I get there. And you can
awesome.
you can just tell that like he had had pure contempt for this guy.
Right,
and it's
right.
just kind of interesting how they flesh out these characters and
funny.
stuff.
Because so many of these writers came from the Pillars team over there at Obsidian, and I wonder if people that have played, because I take it none of us have played Pillars of Eternity, one or two.
No, I have not.
Okay. Anybody? No. And like there's that crowd, and imagine if a lot of people that are coming from the Pillars side of things are like, oh yeah, of course there's all these options. Like this is what that team is good for or good at, right? And just when we're coming in fresh of like, I don't know, I guess we played Alpha Protocol and it's been a while. Just that idea of being wowed again by Obsidian's emphasis on dialogue choices.
I guess I've gotten used to it in this style of game, which is ostensibly like a first-person shooter. Like it feels almost like more like a shooter than an RPG in terms of like gameplay. To have so much dialogue is like, I'm not used to that, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to spend more time talking than shooting in a game where like that because it's first person, because there's so much gun combat, that kind of like trains you to think spaces of like, here's where I shoot things.
Yeah.
Like the fact that you're talking as much as you are like shooting is kind of like a...
It's also a matter of like Mass Effect is the line that I draw. I thought it was going to be Fallout, but I feel like I draw a line to Mass Effect more. And like I'm so used to Mass Effect, which I do like, by the way, quite a bit, is like the emotional responses. It's less about what you're actually going to say and more about like, angry, sad, happy, or whatever. Like it's interesting to have all these like fully written dialogues. I mean, it's not like a new thing. It's in fact, it's an old thing, but I'm just not used to having that and then going and doing some action shooting,
Right. Edward Bailey says, as someone who's a much bigger fan of Mass Effect, I wish this game pushed a little further in that direction. For instance, I feel the need to search everything for loot, but other than helpful lockpicking or hacking items, there doesn't seem to be too much of a benefit for it all. I also wish the game took a more serious tone. How do you find the balance the game strikes between Fallout elements and Mass Effect ones? Where do you feel like it leans too heavily in one direction or the other?
I am coming from it, feeling it was more like Fallout and the kind of Skyrim vein of Bethesda open world RPGs. And so I like the fact that it is a more condensed and it feels like a manageable version of that. Like I'm just always so overwhelmed in those games, and this is kind of the first one where it's like I can go to this area and I can actually do all of the side quests, and see everything. And I like that they've just kind of stripped it down to, like in a Fallout game, like or Skyrim or whatever, every single object is something that you can pick up and it has a weight and you can go sell it, but like 90% of it just doesn't have any use.
Yeah, it's you either find a lot of ammo or just a lot of stuff that you immediately turn into junk.
Yeah.
Right.
So it does feel like it is that part of it feels a little weird. As to the tone, I think like I mentioned earlier, I hope that it gets a little bit more serious. I hope that like it starts chipping away at that facade, because I don't know that I like if the entire game is kind of like, isn't it weird that all these people are so like into corporations and are like kind of following suit with the whole mantra? I feel like I don't know that I could stand like 40 hours of that. But so I hope that there are more characters that kind of like, look, I know this sucks, but I kind of have to do this because for whatever reason I'm indentured to them and I have to.
Well, yeah, Tanner Hoisington, great last name, says, I love the game so far. The only thing I'm worried about is I don't have a sense of the main narrative yet. I'm hoping it comes into stronger focus in part 2 of the Game Club discussion. That is interesting. Everybody's so specific. We're kind of losing the forest of the trees. Do you guys feel like you have an overall sense other than there's a board?
I mean,
does it matter?
It's interesting that, like, I guess, like, the overarching goal seems like you're trying to help unthaw everyone else on the Hope ship
if you
that
want
you came
to.
from.
Yeah,
but it is interesting that it seems like you can totally kind of like scrub that mission right from the beginning if you turn in that guy. So I guess I don't know what the main mission is.
What's the guy's name again? The scientist?
Phineas.
So my sort of loose goal, which I guess I've given myself, is just I think Phineas has more information for me. So that's why I don't want to turn him in yet. There's a bigger story behind Phineas. But I don't know if that's what's going on.
There's no you need to get to the center of the solar system, or like I don't feel like I have a very
Once you defeat the
clear
board, you win.
I don't feel like my objective is like defeat the board. I don't know that I have like a huge, like very obvious guiding principle right now. It feels like, I just got hibernation, or like, well, I guess I'll figure out what I can do, right?
Yeah.
Like that's still where I am. I don't feel like I have a
I'll
very
make
clear
money and
purpose.
survive. Right?
Yeah.
Jordan Edmond says, seeing the botch tab in the quest journal has got to be the thing I laugh the hardest at.
Is that like missions that you messed up? I haven't looked at that. I want to go look at that.
Mike Sweet says, I found myself overwhelmed in the game. I feel like every quest I take opens 3 more, and all of them have multiple options and things to do. I get it. That's the point of the game, but I was also in a place and went to a terminal and started a quest. I get back to town and talk to someone and somehow failed that quest? Like, I didn't even know I accepted it to begin with.
Yeah, I actually ended up failing part of the early town quest because what I ended up doing is I ended up clearing out the geothermal plant before I basically did anything. And so as soon as I got the quest from Reed to like, hey, go deliver this message to Adelaide, it immediately failed it for me because it said, you went to the geothermal plant first before you delivered the message to her. But then I still went back and talked to her, and it didn't like unfail it, but I feel like I did it, the way I would have. But the quest basically said like, you didn't do this quest. So every once in a while I'll run into some friction with that.
Yeah.
But
there was one mission that I had like that where you had mentioned Jameson earlier, and he shows up later in one of the missions where you're supposed to go save him, and I kind of put that on the back burner and didn't think about it. And then when I got there, he was just a mutilated corpse, and it was like, like that was actually a timed thing where you could have saved him, but I guess if someone comes to you and says, hey, you got to help my guy, he's going to get eaten or whatever, you should probably heed that advice and not just go screw off for 10 hours.
Yeah. Thomas said, Ludwig Miller with, quote, die robot quest. It didn't occur to me I can accept a quest, lie about doing a task, and, i.e. killing the robot, get away with it without being dinged for being bad. The lying thing is interesting. Michael Newsel says, I never realized how much I enjoy lying in games. To contrast it with something like Skyrim, where everyone and their dog knows you are the Dragonborn and you're never really having the option to just not be the chosen one. Instead, in the Outer Worlds, I have the option of role-playing what I could actually do in the situation, which is immediately steal a dead man's identity and then lie to everyone and steal his life. People brought up the discussion with the ship. Noah Eberl says, one conversation that stood out to me amongst seas of great conversations in sharp writing was my second lengthy conversation with Ada. Breaking the news about how Hawthorne's death was sort of my fault had me feeling genuinely sorry and nervous for how she'd react. The writing is very well done everywhere, but writing a sympathetic AI like that blows me away.
Wait, so how does she imply that it's your fault?
I mean,
I don't know.
Is that your fault?
I mean, I forget exactly how she frames it.
I'm a little confused about the backstory of Hawthorne. Like, I went into that ship and I was like she was like almost like winking at you, like, well, why don't you just say you're Hawthorne and we can move forward? And I was like, all right, let's do that. Like, and now I'm kind of learning about Hawthorne, like with that guy who was his friend. But I don't. Maybe that's on purpose, like that. I don't really know much about him.
Sure. Yeah. You had just landed on him.
Okay.
And you can. There are more like terminal messages and stuff where you kind of find out how he was working with Phineas and stuff. Like that.
I had real quick with Ada. I had a weird thing. This is just specific to me, but my character that I made, she happens to look a fair bit like Ada in the face
thing?
and the monitor.
Oh, weird.
So I walked up to it and I was like, "Whoa, is this some like spooky, scary, like fate stuff?" And then after talking with her for a while, I was like, "Oh no, that's just coincidence.
Oh,
I
that's
just happen
funny.
to have a similar hairstyle."
Yeah, her face on the ship is one of those like, okay, pretty cheap presentation overall. It's just like, there's a red skin and kind of a face.
Effective.
But then I also had a similar thing too, where I made my character and spent a lot of time with it. And then literally, well, I guess not literally, it's the first NPC you meet once you leave the cave looked identical to my character. And I was like, damn it. I'm not special at all, man. Let's see. Raymond McDonald says, should we kill the main quest holders? I killed the main dude in the canning factory once I was done taking his elective away. On the ship, I realized I made a mistake and did not bring back all the secrets to trade for cash, so I shot the doctor and was sent to Monarch to a dangerous platform. Is this the right way to handle things? No, I don't think so. But you're welcome to kill whoever you want.
There's no wrong way to play this game, as we learned with Hanson.
Yeah.
Who's just skipping entire play.
Murder's
I'm
just
going
another
back.
action.
I'm going back. Let's see. Richard Tweedy. I'm really enjoying the game in general, but one quest that showed what feels like a budget limitation is, quote, the silent voices. The idea of someone killing themselves because they fear the monster they might become is a good idea, but as delivered, it feels like it doesn't quite have the punch it should.
Yeah.
Original Rufio says, every time I finish a conversation with a character, I sit for a minute afterwards staring at him or her, fighting the urge to hammer them in the face. It's such a weird, cool feeling.
Yeah, there is one like science hammer weapon that you can get on Groundbreaker, Hanson, if you ever go back there.
What's this?
But it just does an absurd amount of damage. I guess like keep an eye out for anything that tells you can get a science weapon because they seem to be like the most powerful and have like weird powers with them.
Science is our greatest weapon.
The shrink ray weapon is another one of those.
Lewis Kane says, in terms of combat, the science hammer is all I've ever needed. That thing absolutely one-shots everything.
All right.
Bill Faulkner says...
Me and Sarah are both like, all right, science
Yeah, I was
hammer,
actually going to bring up because like...
But you did slack.
I'm not like super into the combat. Like
It's okay.
Yeah.
it seems totally serviceable, but not really all that interesting. Like the time dilation and like the most fun I have with it is figuring out ways to start encounters from stealth because I have a bonus where if you start with an attack, I have like the ability to charge up my attacks. So and that'll can basically like one shot most enemies. But once you get into the thick of it, like it doesn't like stealth isn't like an option you can really hold for long. And then once people are shooting at you, I don't think the combat is like all that interesting.
No.
So I think I want to get some of those science weapons because I feel like they'll spice up combat in a way that like without them it feels uninteresting.
For sure. And I really wish there's a stealth takedown. And they said on the cover story trip, like, maybe in the sequel we'll finally get around to a stealth takedown. Or even they said again, maybe the DLC we'll add something like that. But that is noticeable. It's like, is this going to be a perk or something? Because it's weird not to have this when I'm hiding in the grass behind somebody.
There is it does seem pretty forgiving in terms of like the distance to the next character. If they're not looking at you and you kind of, because a stealth hit will be so much damage, if you can one shot them, it usually doesn't alert people around them.
Yeah.
What about, because I've been pretty much dropping all my like points. Like I have not been doing melee and stuff. Like I've been doing all guns. But like, am I just screwing myself as far as stealth? Because like if I fire a gun, they're gonna hear me, right?
I think I've gotten a lot of use of like going into melee insofar as like there's I think at 20 or 40 there's the ability to like hold the button down to like charge up your attack. I think that is about as useful as far as I've gone down that branch. Yeah. But then after that immediately I've been speccing mostly dialogue and guns basically.
I've been doing my partners because I rely on them a lot. I just like sending them in to take care of business.
I've been super self-reliant. I've just been powering. Although I think I gave Parvati, I might have given her the science hammer and just not thought twice about it. And maybe she's had my hammer the whole time.
Sending her in to do that slow motion slam is just
very
always
good.
really satisfying.
And you're going to see it a lot.
Right.
Let's see. So just on the gunplay stuff, Mario de Oliveira, thank you for writing in. I've been nibbling at this game all day, but Outer Worlds has yet to hook me properly. Feels like I can exhaust the dialogue trees with impunity, and in a post-Destiny world, it's hard to be kicking and grooving with gunplay like this. Even Borderlands upped their game in some regard. And DBRG13 says, I feel like there's something wrong with the gunplay.
That's a Dr. Big 13.
Oh, Dr. Big 13 says, I feel like there's something wrong with the gunplay. After shooting someone in the head 5 times, I set the game to easy just so I can enjoy the combat.
Yeah. Okay. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Like maybe I should be harsher on it, But when I'm comparing it to Fallout, I'm like, oh, this is an improvement.
And
so
that's where I'm coming from too. It's serviceable, which is a huge step up from Fallout.
I started playing on hard just to see, because I've heard people saying like, oh, you should play it on hard for it to be interesting, but I think I might just pump it down to normal, because I'm not enjoying a lot of the encounters. I don't think they're like I haven't like, it's serviceable, but I've never been like, nice, I did that. Like I've never been like proud with, or like, you know, happy with like the way I did perform in combat. It just seems very clumsy a lot of the time.
Yeah,
sure. So like I think the fact that enemies can kill you very quickly isn't doing much for me on like how much resources they take up, or like how I'm approaching encounters. It just feels like I'm just peeking out of cover. Like I have a weapon that, like, I think I turned an assault rifle into an electric thing, and there's one where you can charge it up and fire
I did the same exact thing. That's funny.
So I'm basically like peeking out from behind cover and like charging up a shot, peeking out of cover, firing again, doing that over and over again. That's like my go-to strategy right now.
My big strategy is just like walking into the middle and just shooting a bunch.
See, when you do that on hard, you die.
On the D-pad.
Yeah.
And I'm enjoying it, by the way.
Are you guys having a tough time with ammo? Because when I restart, I think I'm going to go melee just because I don't want to deal with that anymore.
No, and maybe it's my obsessed. Like, I always turn into a kleptomaniac in these games, and so I've been stealing everything, and I have mostly been doing sneak melee attacks to take out as many people as I can. And so, like, I have 2,000 bullets for each of the different ammo attacks.
So
but it was interesting to hear that bumping it up doesn't make a difference, because I've been playing on normal, and it has been easy enough where I just don't use any of the consumables, like any of the health stuff or anything like of that.
Like I totally just missed the prompt where they tell you, it's like, here's how your inhaler works. And I've gone into the inventory and like, look at, these are all just like bonuses that are like, I thought it would, like, you could mix things with like the med kits to augment how much it heals you, but it's all like, oh, your weapon sway is a little like, I don't know that this game has like the nuance in combat for weapon sway to be a stat that I care about.
But like health regen, like that's such a common one with food too.
Yeah, so like, but I haven't delved into that stuff so, and I haven't needed it because I have like 30 like first aid kits. Yeah. So I just spam those a lot. And
do you have a lot of first aid kits? Because I ran out of those very quickly, and I don't know where to get more.
Do you think
I have like 100 of them.
What?
Yeah. Do you think that might be because you skipped an entire area of the game? You just kind of ran past everything?
You went straight to the hard, because it was only in like the last hour or so where I started to get to encounters where it was like they were taking off big chunks of my health.
Yeah. Did you end up fighting all those lizards in the one area where you have to rescue that criminal lady?
I gassed them.
So you
which
gassed
is
them
an option, and it kind of like takes care of all the lizards in the main.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I gassed them after I killed everyone in there.
So is there a nuance to health that I'm not understanding? Because I just basically just hit left bumper, when I get to mount, and
the only nuance,
I haven't run out of anything.
The only nuance is once you're out of combat, your health will replenish anyway.
Okay.
And so I don't use that many health packs either.
Yeah. So I think the way it works is that you get multiple slots as you upgrade it. I think if there's a particular stat or something where you eventually get multiple slots in your inhaler. So like the first slot you can put a med kit, and the second slot you can put like a banana or something, and that'll give you like, you basically breathe it all in at once, and that'll give you the
banana.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that'll give you the bonuses of every item you put in the slot. Okay.
So I do need to go into a menu and put stuff in there.
Yeah. So like right now, I think I have 2 slots in it right now. I might have 3, but like you're basically throwing a bunch of stuff in your inhaler and then like inhaling it. But like I haven't.
It's like the DeLorean and Back to the Future too. You're just like throwing a bunch of stuff.
So like bananas have like the weapon sway will be a little bit better. You might move a little faster. Your hacking skill might be up for a couple seconds, which is a weird thing. But for the most part, I've completely ignored that part of the game and haven't really thought about it. I don't feel like I'm missing out by having ignored it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Grim Feather says, could you give us a quick rundown of the types of players or characters you're playing? I've been focusing on melee, stealth, and dialogue so far, and I love that my smooth-talking character can charm his way out of most confrontations. However, I do wish I had access to an assassinate or backstab style attack. We've kind of touched on a little bit, but any other rundowns of the characters we're playing here?
I've been, a lot of my partners been leveling up them, putting a lot of points in guns to.
Not leadership though?
Leadership, that's the stat, yeah. And then as far as perks, like I beeline to the speed up, like walking speed and running speed, just because like I don't think I've ever played a game where I've felt like I move fast enough in my life. And then but mostly I'm just generally a nice lady named Kylie who,
Kylie.
And I have decent dialogue, so I take advantage of that.
Yeah.
But mostly guns.
It's
and
weird, like
leadership.
the way it bundles certain stats together. So like I just wanted to be able to have all the good dialogue options, but I as a result I have persuade and I have intimidate, and I think I have like medical maybe. Like I just happen to be very good at medical things, so it's just like a thing where it's like, oh yeah, all of a sudden there was the doctor when you go back to Terra 2 who's like, oh yeah, I'm completely ignoring you, oh, you're still here or whatever, and then it was like thing where he was trying to fix somebody up and I'm like, oh, you can do this thing and it'll totally work. So like I have like this weird kind of disconnect from my stats in a lot of ways where I just happen to have all these bonuses because of the way like, oh, I want this one stat but I have to give it to everything in this area. But I've been focusing mostly on long guns. I've been focusing on dialogue and I've been focusing on stealth. But I feel like I think there is an option to respec on your ship. I might respec out of stealth because I'm not sure that I'm finding it super useful so far.
Yeah. CT Bishop says, the flaw system in the game is very neat. I hope to see more RPGs adopt a similar system in the future. Manton Minnick says, I really love the flaw system because it made for this situation in my game. I was over encumbered and getting shot at by robots a lot, and the game offered a perk point for robophobia as a flaw, which drops a bunch of helpful stats when around robots. But I really wanted to fast travel while over encumbered to sell all these helmets I had, so I took the trade-off. Then later in the game, when I first met Sam, the robotic companion, one of my dialogue options was, ah! I assume because of the robophobia. Have any of your choices locked you out of things you're regretting already?
I haven't had the guts to take a.
Oh, really?
Yet. Yeah. So
I took the one that boosts up my stealth. I think it's like a concussion, and it boosts up my the armor, like the base armor stat. And I kind of regret it in a way because it's like, oh, now all my stats are in the red a little bit for weapons and stuff like that.
I haven't had anything interesting like that. Most of it has been like, oh, you're afraid of raptids or something, and you lose all these stats on raptids, but you get an extra perk point. Like, and then I found the same thing for robots, which is like you lose all these stats on robots, but you get a perk point. So I'm hoping that like I get one that isn't just like the bonus is a perk point, because the perk points just seem kind of like they're useful, but they feel ancillary. Of like, I have to have this extra perk right now. Like they don't seem like they're the ones that I've gotten haven't felt like they're worth it. So I'd like something more interesting.
So Hanson, are you saying that you got a flaw that had a specific perk that it then gave you when you took it, or did you?
No, I just made that trade off.
Okay.
So I chose the armor thing.
I take more plasma damage. I was like, oh, sure, I'll take that. That doesn't seem so bad.
Right.
But robophobia was offered to me, but I didn't want it because I like robots.
It's also like, it was weird because that was offered to me after I'd have had like maybe 2 fights with robots. It felt like very like, I don't know that my character has established that much of a fear of robots.
Well, look, Sarah Connor's only fought Terminators like twice in her life.
That's right.
She's pretty scared of robots.
Yeah.
Dylan Sawyer says, well, I think the strength of an RPG is the depth and range of its choices. I think the decision to allow the player to choose whether or not to accept flaws really undermined their impact, at least for me. I found that the single perk point it granted was not worth the negatives it came with. I think it's interesting. Fair. It's kind of like a clumsy system, but it's fun, you know?
Yeah, it kind of feels like they were taking the easy route with that of like, okay, you're doing these things and they can negatively affect you, but we'll give you the choice of whether you want to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I wonder if it would have just been better for them to say, you know what, this is just going to happen to you. But I'm kind of in the place where I don't care much about the other perks that I haven't gotten in the tiers I'm at. So when that option comes up and it's like, do you want to trade these stats for another perk that I'm not super interested in?
Yeah.
I guess I would rather it been a specific perk or a specific bonus that I couldn't get another way that would have been more of an interesting choice.
Yeah, instead of just like, well, you'll work up your way up the tree faster. Like right now, I don't have a good understanding of like, am I going to be able to get every perk eventually, or am I going to have to choose? So without that understanding, I'm not sure that like, I don't understand the value of a single perk point because I haven't established, like, you know, I'm still kind of figuring out what it is.
Yeah.
Can you guys double jump?
No. Can you?
I can, and it just hit when I hit a certain level.
Huh.
I didn't pick it. I would have picked it as a perk if it was offered to me, but like I think I hit level 10 or 11, and I was like, hey, you can double jump now.
I'm like level 12.
I was like, thank you, I'll take it.
That's interesting. The developers at Obsidian also said that they had parkour early on in the game. Then they had to cut it due to time and budget, which was their catchphrase. And they said, so obviously, if the series moves on in the future, which it will under Microsoft, like I'd imagine parkour will be coming back for more maneuverability and
climbing
stuff.
buildings and stuff.
I guess so, yeah. Daniel Van Pelt says, I acquired my first flaw from taking fall damage too much and accepted a 25% slower move speed among other stat decreases.
Oh, wow.
And the crazy thing is, I loved it. It changed how I played my character. From that moment on, I didn't take any movement perks, and I assumed an experiment went bad and I crippled my legs. What a crazy game to have created this narrative.
That is fun.
Yeah.
I would never sacrifice movement speed for anything, as I've established earlier. But I like that sort of role play.
A lot of that stuff feels like it's tailored not to be interesting from a gameplay perspective, but more from like I'm going to pretend this is it's a lot like. The idea of taking on these roles for roleplay stuff, I guess, is like that's a thing that I would never do, but I'm fascinated by.
Yeah.
And sorry, just to reverse my opinion that I just said, if a game had forced a flaw on me of taking away 25% of my move speed, I'd be pissed.
Yeah.
So it's probably better that it's an option in those.
I wonder if it's like a thing because I'm playing on hard, and I'd be interested to see if like on the whatever the hardest difficulty is, if they kind of force those flaws on you.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
That would be an interesting way to change difficulty.
I think, what is it? There's something with the flaws where you have the option of taking more flaws. There's something like that.
I think if you play on hard, you can take on more flaws.
Yeah.
Why do you do that to yourself?
What do you mean? Oh,
play on hard.
Well, because like everyone was telling me like the combat was boring and like simple and easy.
Podcasts?
Yeah, other podcasts. No, I think they were talking about it on Waypoint as well. But like, I think I might just take on like switch it back to normal because I'm not like I'm not having more fun as a result of it being harder. I just feel like it's just like
I guess I'm such a big fan of seeing what the baseline is before I know what I mean. Like let's get my feet wet here and like figure out what this is before I'm like. No, I gotta play this on the hardest.
Well, I mean, I started on normal and then like.
Oh, you did, okay.
But it was very quick to move on to hard. But I might just pump it down to normal because I'm not. Yeah.
Bill Faulkner, real quick, says character creation. I love the idea that the character creation is actually well selecting who he thinks will be best from a huge group. Like the kind of built-in lore is very fun. James Knight has something relevant to you, Serial. Says, I had my snarky, gunslinging conman character go drinking with Pravarti and Ellie. After convincing Pravarti whiskey was the best choice for a first-time drinker, I role-played that my former bartender character would feel bad about giving someone a bad drinking experience. So I persuaded her to drink water, much to Ellie's chagrin. Later, back on the ship, Pravarti thanked me for convincing her to stay hydrated and didn't have a hangover. What role-play character moments have you guys had that really paid off?
I think I had a gameplay moment that was that exact story, where I did that exact thing in that exact order.
Oh, wow.
But that's part of a much larger plot with Parvati later on the Groundbreaker that I think is my favorite plot line so far, because she goes to the Groundbreaker and she's like just immediately impressed by all the tech there.
Yeah.
And she meets like the leader of the Groundbreaker, the person who's basically responsible for running it, and she basically falls in love with her. And you're kind of like, there's no romances in the game like with any of the characters, but you're kind of like coaching her on how to like, oh yeah, you just tell her how you feel. And like she kind of says like, well, I've been kind of burned in the past because I'm asexual, so I don't have like kind of like intimate physical connection with someone, and people have been called me like really cold about it. So you're kind of coaching her through kind of her like love affair with this other character. And I'm at a point where it's like, I'm at a point as a role playing person of like, if Parvati wants to leave my party to like run off with her, I'm totally cool with it.
Oh, that's sweet. That's funny.
So like that has been like my, like not any like, because it feels so distant from the rest of it. Like here's a real human connection between two people that feels so ostracized from like the corporate spiel of that everyone else seems to have. And yeah, that has been my favorite plotline. And that like taking her to drink of like, oh yeah, you'll be fine. Like she doesn't drink that much. Or I think she's like a recovering alcoholic. She used to go to bars or whatever. But yeah, like coaxing her and trying to like guide her through, leading that colony.
That is a huge refrain. So many people commented on specifically that aspect. And Dylan Lloyd takes lead here. Says, I really love the start of the quest line where you help Parvati woo Jun Lee.
Yeah.
It's fun to help a character romance another instead of the focus on the player trying to romance the crew members.
Yeah, that first conversation you have with Jun Lee is so good because you can really kind of like quietly elbow Parvati, be like, keep going, keep talking to her, which is nice.
Devin Lane says, seeing their crush develop and the suspense of what will happen next in her storyline is way more engaging than the standard pick the romantic dialogue option until they like you format used in many RPGs. Are you guys enjoying the change-up in formula, or do you think the lack of player romance is a missed opportunity?
I've never been much of a player romance guy. It always feels super awkward, and it's like it's so gamified that it's not interesting. Where it's like, just give this person enough gifts and they'll like have sex with you. Like that's never felt like an interesting way to approach romances.
Yeah, like just having humping someone be the goal for
gotta
like,
get that cutscene.
Yeah, and then that's the thing is that like the thing about romancing in a lot of games is that you never see the repercussions of that. It's always like the lead up to sex, and then like I'm done. Like, never talk to this person never again.
Yeah.
You never have like the repercussions of like, okay, well now that I'm like in a relationship with this person, how does that change the rest of the game?
Yeah.
That's why I like them when they're more authored. Like I think the Triss and Yennefer choice in Witcher 3 I think is a much better approach to romance, because especially with Yennefer you're seeing it across multiple games, or Triss, and like in Yennefer they bring up if you've read the books it's a lot more impactful, but like I like the idea of the relationship being more than just like a game, right? Like it feels like a larger part of their life because it's authored, versus like I could screw any of these people, like who am I going to pick? It feels so like artificial. So I definitely like this approach of like, let's author a relationship that feels tailor-made to the game, versus giving me I'm okay with that sacrifice of having that versus like gamify, like having a relationship with someone.
Ben Cooper says Ashley Birch playing Parvati really pretty much solidified her as my main companion, and her quest is utterly adorable. I also very much enjoy how Sam sarcastically communicates through product slogans. The writing for him is subtle comedic genius. Rod Watson says the writing has been great so far. I think my favorite bit is if you agree to let Parvati come on to Unreliable, she quietly goes, "I've got a captain," which is very sweet.
I like her catchphrase, "Absa Shirley."
Absa Shirley? I don't think I've heard her say that.
She said it a couple times so far.
Oh, fun. Right. Jordan Schaefer says, who are you taking around in your party? I've had Parvati since the start and added Felix as soon as I got him. It was striking that I spent the first several hours getting to know Parvati and the Vicar, and then unlocked the next two on Groundbreaker within 20 minutes of each other. I felt like I'd barely gotten to know Felix, and the game was already pushing me to send him back to the ship. Random small detail, I really like the hair color options. I'm rocking the dark hair with purple accents.
I usually like to go silver. I don't know why.
I like that too.
I was going to say like that was my first impression of the game was, holy crap, someone actually made hair that looks good in a character creator, after all those Bethesda games. But I've been using mostly Parvati and Ellie after I unlocked her.
Ellie is the doctor?
Yeah.
She's the finger guns girl from the trailer?
Yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and it is... Felix is the weird one because I feel like I spent 30 seconds with him, and then it's like, all right, you can come on to the ship,
literally give
and
you that
he's
option.
just kind of been there, and I haven't really.
I think it's because he's by
missed
default
him.
your third partner, and so like you already have two people with you. So now you have to make the choice of like, oh, do you want to swap him out?
Yeah.
So it's like, screw you, go back to the ship.
He was on Groundbreaker. You met him right when you got off the ship, and I think he was waiting. So maybe you.
I think you have to talk to him. Like
him.
he's like right immediately to your right as you're walking into like the main Groundbreaker station.
I didn't talk to him.
I think you just said, because you overhear a conversation he's having with someone else, and then you can talk to him about it.
Jason M. O'Brien says Felix is his favorite. When he's reading his qualifications to be a crew member, I was rolling. The dialogue was so funny.
Yeah, his conversation is you basically coaching him on how to be a better interviewer. Of like, no, just sell me on yourself. Like, don't tell me why. Like, don't hate on yourself. Just like tell me why I need you on my crew.
Yeah. Oh, fun.
And he's like, okay, well, and then he'll like list off things like, I don't know how to do this.
I'm sure. I imagine he's still there. I'm sure I can probably go talk to him.
Quick aside, like that disguise system, I think it's kind of dumb.
Oh, the hologram thing?
Yeah, it feels very gamey in a way that I'm not super into.
I did like the line when you're talking to the doctor. You can talk to him long enough, and you can ask, how does a hologram sweeten your breath? Because that's like one of the side effects of the holograms. It'll sweeten your breath, and his response is just science.
Mark Ramirez says, I just got the hologram projection, and I love it. To be able to walk around in a restricted area without having to sneak or be paranoid is great.
I think
Take that, Kyle.
I think
Yeah, shut up.
What the hell?
No.
He's wearing a disguise. He's wearing a disguise. Like,
I'll take it.
No, I don't have a problem with the idea of sneaking around in a disguise.
Yeah.
What I hate is how gamified it is, because it's like you literally walk past a section that says restricted access, and then you suddenly transform into the other characters. But it's just like it's another like suspension of disbelief thing where everyone was looking at me in that medical bay. I walked by this thing and no one said anything. Everyone was just kind of oblivious to the fact that suddenly I look like a guard. I'm just gonna walk by it, and like the restriction on like you have a certain amount of space you can walk in this area.
Yeah.
I think that's fine, but yeah, it's like I find it hard to like suspend my disbelief on that front.
and it's a little weird that you have like the 3 strikes of like, well, if if this person catches you once it runs out, he'll come talk to you and you'll make an excuse or whatever, and that resets it. But you can only do that 3 times in a row, and it's just kind of this weird. But if you walk out, if you walk the extra 5 feet and leave the area and then come back, those are refreshed, and so it's kind of a wonky system. But it's
better gameplay probably because it's like you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it too much once you cross that threshold, and then you kind of get into like the stat management in your head. But like, it even like getting the explanation from the doctor was kind of like, okay, this is just like, don't let anyone get too close to you because maybe your hologram will wiggle. It's like, okay, all right.
Yeah. Greg Mahan says, I think a really nice thing the game does is have your crew members go out of their way to speak to you. It's such a simple touch to have a crew member be waiting at the exit of the Unreliable to talk to you before you embark, and their unique dialogue about certain planets and tasks they want you to accomplish at your destination has really caused me to swap out party members when I originally hadn't planned to. Not since the days of Mass Effect 2 have I felt like my companions in an RPG are fleshed out characters with their own unique goals and desires that they want to accomplish. I love all the little ways that they interact with NPCs during dialogue with other companions on the Unreliable or while adventuring.
Yeah.
And with you throughout the course of the game, kudos to the folks at Obsidian for making some of my favorite companions.
That was definitely like the degree to which you interact with your companions is definitely a place where me expecting Fallout and getting Mass Effect was like hugely impactful, because I was expecting Mass Effect 3 where it's just like my partner's a dog, so we're not going to talk much, and like most of the partners are just kind of spouting lines and not really interacting with the world. So I do like that it is hewing closer to Mass Effect, where it's like you have companion quests that are designed to help you like foster your relationship with this person, and that they're talking to people, and like the body speech that you get before you make your first choice. That feels like a really good, like, hey, look, I'm not just like you're my captain, but I'm not just gonna like do whatever you say. I have like my own thoughts and feelings and stuff.
Yeah,
as well.
There's a personality there. And once I got, I got Parvati and I really liked her, and then I met Vicar and I was like, I don't know about this guy.
Yeah.
But his kind of quest line seems really interesting to me, and so that makes me want to kind of throw him into the party every now and then, just so I can figure out like what that book is that he's trying to translate. That's interesting.
It's a very human motivation of like, I don't like you, but I like where this is going. This seems interesting.
It's interesting.
Like I'm here insofar as we get this book found out and translated out of French, but once I'm done, like you and me are done after this. And there was this weird conversation. Like I got back on the ship as I was leaving for Terra 2 again, and it's like, hey, by the way, Felix and Ellie are having a conversation somewhere on the ship. Like I don't know what that's about, and you go out and they're just talking. Like that even a touch like that feels like makes the world feel more alive. Of like these people exist outside of your presence, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. Tom Fink says, I've seen Vicar Max's companion ability over 100 times, and it never fails to make me laugh. Never knew I needed a religious scar face in my life.
That's actually what I was going to say, is like he's way more hardcore than I thought. Like he has like the shotgun slung over his shoulder, and he has all these one-liners that are like, time for your confession, and like like stuff like that. It's like I did not expect this guy to be like that, but all right, you can stick around.
Yeah, I guess I'm not sure what a Vicar is, so I just expected, he's a priest. But hearing that he's apparently like down to throw down, seems like I should have him in my party more often.
Like shotgun over the shoulder, like it's like that's like you see it a million times.
Are you saying he's that one priest from Trigun? Does anyone know what Trigun is?
I know what Trigun is. I haven't watched a lot of it, but yes.
I heard that it was too.
Yeah. Wait, he just drags a big like cross.
He's the one who has
It's a smaller gun than that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Fred DeNovo.
Well, he's got a bunch of tiny ones in there.
Yeah. Fred DeNovo says, I think this game is great and the onboarding of the systems is excellent. The one funny thing that happened to me, though, is right after Parvati joined me, on the lower left corner had a new system pop up associated with the D-pad. I didn't see a tutorial window pop up so far. I was curious about it and pressed up on the D-pad only to have Parvati suddenly go ballistic on the guard I was happening to be targeting. It got a big laugh from me and I reloaded, but was tempted just to live with the accidental choice since the game adapts so well to my choice.
Oh, I wonder why they reset. I
don't know.
Just an enemy?
I think it was a guard that like I don't know if they were just standing there. I don't think it was like an aggressive.
That makes sense.
Right. Jawar, hello. The best quality of life feature has to be that you can walk through your companions so they don't trap you in doorways. I know this isn't the only game to do that, but it happens all the time that it really sticks out. Brandon Armali says, one small thing that always makes me laugh. Whenever one of your companions goes down, the other one has some quick bark of dialogue calling them out.
Yeah, well, I mean, my problem is that playing on hard and not focusing on my partners all that much means they were basically dead in most of my encounters. Like the second it starts, so they were basically like my extra health. Where it's like, okay, you guys go attack them. I'm gonna shoot them from behind. Okay, you guys are both dead. I'm gonna run around and shoot stuff until like the encounter is over. So part of the reason I want to respec is to emphasize the partners a little bit more because I think that would make combat.
I lean on them a lot. For
like
sure.
I haven't used their abilities all that much because they're dead before I can use them. So
I haven't used them much.
Matthew Wokes says, I love the game so far, but one of my small nitpicks is taking your gun out every time you want to talk or open a door. I'm playing a quick-witted character and it takes me out of the moment every time I whip out a gun, every time I want to open a door or talk.
Yeah, and that seems like a bug where it's like you're pressing the button to talk to this person or whatever, and it just happens to be the same button that pulls your gun out. And I think that every time too, and it kind of freaks me out because you'll be looking at them and talking, and then you just point your gun at their face. And it's like,
weird.
Have you guys had any conversations where it's like, whoa, why do you have a gun? Like, I haven't encountered anything like that so far. So I haven't been paying that, like, whether or not I have a gun. Like,
they comment on like the Marauder armor.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Let's see. Which direction? Here's one. James Bedell is a very specific point. Maybe I missed it, but the stats for each weapon block every other damn weapon on the screen, making it a pain in the ass to decide which ones to sell, scrap, etc.
Yeah. That's a note I wrote down. Just the way, like the UI of the menu system is like, if you're, I don't like it. I just want that stuff to be pushed to the side.
Yeah, I wish there was a way that you could just say like, just tag all this stuff I'm picking. Like if instead of pick up, it was just like tag as junk immediately.
Yeah.
Because then I feel like I have to do the cleanup in my inventory of like, okay, trash.
Yeah. Direful says, I was reminded while playing the game of a phrase used by the developers during the lead up to its release, quote, time and budget. I really felt like the limitations of the game's budget became obvious in certain key elements, the UI and enemy design. The UI is of somewhat low quality, I thought. The on-screen UI seemed to be kind of blurry and the menus were confusing and difficult to maneuver through. The enemy design felt really repetitious, especially on Terra 2, where all the Marauders look exactly the same. The UI I definitely noticed, like the pause menu and stuff like that, or even like, the galactic map, select a planet. It's like, oh, this is just like a JPEG. It's just like one static image, but you know what? Time and budget, baby. Let's see. Aiden Clinton says, hey, Captain Reed, Mech Red, the bounty hunter, the bounty target on Groundbreaker owned me when I first went after him. Come back after getting a couple levels, upgrading gear, and changing my party only for him to recognize Felix. And let me buy the radiator parts on the cheap.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I just went in there guns blazing and just killed everybody. Yeah.
I had enough persuade that I was like, because the bounty lady tells you either bring me his head or bring me his lighter. And I was able to convince him to just give me the lighter and then basically just not do anything else. So that was a very quick quest for me.
David says, as a narrative-centric gamer, I really do appreciate them emphasizing completing quests as a path to leveling and cash gain. But it does make it seem like everything else is for naught. Food and ammo end up being the most valuable resources to collecting gameplay. Combat outside of questing is not the path to leveling. That is interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing that I want to note, like about like the way the game gamifies a lot of your choices, is that like I've gotten into a rhythm where if I can steal something, I will do it if someone is near me, because they'll be like, hey. And then I have such a high persuade that I can be like, don't worry about it. And both of those options will give me experience. So I'm basically using the fact that I can steal to level my character like way more quickly than I otherwise would.
Yeah,
maybe you can even explain it to me a little bit. But I was confused by that system because it was like a lot of options were open to me right away of persuade and lying and stuff like that. And I thought like the 25 next to it was like, you got to be this level and you are. I was like, okay, great. But it seems like it's more like this is the reward you'll get if you lie.
Yeah. This is the option for persuade 25. If you have 25 persuade, this is why you have this option now.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's how it works. And then they reward you for using it. So like when I'm in conversations with like not super essential characters, I try to like dig through everything. It's like, how many times can I use that stuff so that I can level further? Okay. So it's like this weird thing where like my decisions are often guided by like, well, I kind of like where persuade 5 might take me, but persuade 25 is probably going to give me more experience, so I'll take that approach. So
you might say that you're min-maxing the game.
Oh,
no, I wouldn't. No.
I don't love that for narrative reasons. Like I just want to have a conversation, and I don't want to be influenced by like ooh, if I lie now, I'll have more lie power later.
I don't want game logic to influence what should be narrative-based decisions. Yeah.
Brian Keith Jr. has something similar, saying one thing that stuck out to me with this game compared to newer Fallout and Mass Effect is the silent protagonist. I know time and budget, but it's not a complaint. Rather, do you find that having a non-speaking hero makes it tougher or easier for you to insert yourself into the game and enjoy the experience?
I'm not having an issue with it here because canonically they do speak, right? Like you are saying things to people and they're responding to what you
said.
said.
It's always confusing. Like, is Chrono canonically speaking or not?
Yeah, is he a mute? So I'm not having that problem with it. It does feel like it does feel like a best of both worlds where my character has agency and is a character in this world, but also they are my avatar,
Yeah.
I think I'd like to see my character more. I'd like to see her in conversations.
Well, just go to idle every once in a while and then the camera will do that.
It's why you don't spend that much. You shouldn't spend that much time in character creation. It's not worth it.
Yeah. In this game especially.
I chose my cool hairstyle and that was it. Like, I'm not going to mess around with my nose structure or like my eyebrows. Like, that's what you'll do that once and then never care about it.
I spent more time in character creation than Terra 2. Timmy D says, he knows how to make us laugh. He says, hi, Ben and the little butts.
Hey.
Jeff Park
with a Z?
Jeff Park would love that.
Serial?
Did he spell it with a Z?
He did not. He says, hey, when playing The Outer Worlds, I couldn't help but notice the sheer amount of dialogue skill checks in the game. Is it just me, or is this game utilize dialogue skills on a level unlike any other game? I actually feel like putting my precious points into dialogue skills is useful and or rewarding. What do you think?
That was one of the first. Like, I put most of mine into stealth first, and then when I started trying to weigh what I should do next, it was like, oh yeah, I should just do dialogue as much as possible because these things come up all the time, and they can have a huge impact on things. Where it's like, well, I could kill all of these people, and have like this long drawn out thing, or I can just persuade this guy a little and get through it.
And go ahead. I was going to say, no, please, Surreal.
Okay,
I was just going to say.
Well, I was just going to say, there was one choice where like I talked to someone and we had like a very linear exchange. And then at the end, it was like, okay, see you later. And then like lie, intimidate, persuade. And then I had two options for persuade. So it was like, man, this like putting points into dialogue seems so crucial to getting like the good parts of the game out, which is like the story.
Yeah. Right.
So I've definitely like been putting that is the thing I've put the most points into.
And maybe it's just because I've been playing D&D on a regular basis now,
really?
But like playing a game like this is just like, oh my god, like it is so born out of D&D, and it's obvious. Game Informer's Matt Miller is always obsessed with just reminding everybody, like, where do you think these systems came from? Like, D&D, of course, is the granddaddy of all this stuff, and I guess Lord of the Rings before that, or whatever nonsense it is. But it was fun on the cover story trip talking to Tim Kaine in particular about D&D, and like, the dumb option, the dialogue option in these games. He's like, that came out of just my friends and I in high school. We had a D&D campaign where we just kept on giving the dumb option. Like, so many of the tropes and quirks of Tim Kaine and Leonard Boyarsky's games, like going back to Fallout 1, just came from high school D&D sessions, which is such a fun detail. Let's see. Neil H. says, I'm really enjoying the dialogue in Outer Worlds. So many games have dialogue trees and specific responses tied to personality types, but few seem to have found ways to make those responses natural. Outer Worlds does an awesome job of having realistic options that don't just have a label of sarcastic or friendly. They've managed to get those feelings across without shoehorning in over-the-top responses. It's very clear when I select my options how my character will come across. I love the hell out of RPGs, but that has always been a weak spot in many of them. It's refreshing to see a game where your personality comes across as dialogue without dumb labels.
Yeah, I like that it is bespoke that way. And I think the setup and the world kind of work in tandem to flesh that stuff out. So like when you're first introducing the concept of diet toothpaste, like I like that they very naturally segue into like, well, what the hell is diet toothpaste? Without saying like, tell me about diet toothpaste. Like it doesn't feel like you're running like the dialogue of like, tell me about this thing, tell me about this thing, tell me about this thing. It's they zero in on like the things that you'd be most interested in and they stick to that and then allow you to like have different responses to that, which is I think the way to approach it.
It even seems to lock you out of, which I like, out of opportunities to like get more information sometimes because it would be kind of unnatural to be like, oh, by the way, we were talking about that thing, and I picked option 2, but now I'm ready to pick option 3. So let's repeat the first half of this conversation.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. David says, I really like how when you get to space for the first time, one of the dialogue options lets you entertain totally running away from all the conflict and leaving the solar system. This totally came to my mind, and a lot of games won't have speech options that I'd think of myself.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Like,
very fun idea. Print Crowd Print says, look at all the previews. It said I could play through my character as a bumbling idiot. Thing is, I only seem to find the normal ways to play so far, unless I don't recognize that choice because I am a bumbling idiot.
No, yeah, I assume that is tied to the original. You have like 5 points or whatever that you can put into it. If you had made your character dumb, then I assume you would get those dumb options.
Maybe I'm getting the dumb options. I don't think I think I pretty high intelligence from what I recall.
You also skipped entire sections of the game.
I'm going back, Kyle. I've been busy.
You can't redo life, man.
Peter Fontana says, I think the writing is hilarious. However, I'm a bit disappointed with the dumb dialogue choices in the game so far. They're very funny, but don't seem to actually affect the conversation in any meaningful way. Yeah, that's fair. I know that later on there's some choices you can make that could be very dumb that have big ramifications, apparently, that I remember they told us about on the cover story trip, but I won't say anything like that. David Couples is speaking your language here. Jeff, I'm saying, are you guys big kleptos like me whenever a game allows for stealings?
Absolutely.
Allows for stealing. Let's see. Jared Burries. I get good vibes from Obsidian and think they've quietly established themselves as one of the most consistent developers in the business, and I'm so happy for them for the Outer Worlds. It is crazy that they pulled this off.
Yeah.
Especially considering Private Division, kind of the indie label within Take-Two. And they kept emphasizing time and budget. Even on the cover story trip, it was like, don't think of this as a AAA game, like time and budget. We're emphasizing replayability. And I feel like it turned out so much better on so many fronts than I was expecting, than I think a lot of people were expecting, just on the bugs and polish and everything like that. And this is where I become a conspiracy theorist. And I should have asked them when I interviewed them on the Game Informer show just a couple weeks ago. But Microsoft has every incentive in the world to help this game out because they own the sequels. Because with Private Division, the publisher, the developers still own the IP. And since Microsoft owns Obsidian, therefore Microsoft owns what will be the Outer Worlds 2, right? And so I should have asked. I'm wondering if they gave a little money towards the end to bring in more QA, anything like that. Because why the hell wouldn't you?
Yeah, probably.
The difference between this game releasing as a 6 versus a 925 for Microsoft is gigantic.
Maybe, but then I think of State of Decay 2 that came out with all those problems
yes,
too.
That's a great point. You're right. Yeah, we should give it up for Obsidian here.
I was interested in that, I think Obsidian has gotten a lot of crap in the past, especially about Fallout New Vegas, in how many bugs that had and stuff. And I thought I remembered them having said in an interview or something, just kind of floating out of Bethesda's engine is kind of hard to work with,
Right.
And so that kind of made me think how much of those past problems, because that was the first big surprise with me was this runs really well and it looks really good,
That's not entirely true. I mean, I played the hell out of South Park Stick of Truth, and that game was also a disaster at launch. It's not just the Bethesda engine, I think.
This is Unreal?
Yes, it is. Okay.
I also think that there's an interesting, it's a good moment for this game to come out because it positions them very well going into the next gen. Is this is the RPG developer to watch because both Bethesda and BioWare are coming off kind of big failures for them.
Their wounds.
And so everyone, I think a lot of the enthusiasm behind this game is you have failed where the two biggest players in this space, or you have succeeded where the two biggest players in this space have failed. So it's there's a lot of obviously they have a lot of goodwill, and Microsoft, I'm sure, was very adamant of we need to strike now while the iron is hot.
Yeah. And it really taps into the old school stuff that people liked about those games too.
But it doesn't feel completely stuck in those ways. It feels it is smart about let's address some of the issues that people might have. Let's add some quality of life stuff in there without feeling so much well, Fallout 4 is basically a shooter that has some RPG elements, and Andromeda is bad.
Ted Hahn says, for some reason, this game makes me think of how great Mass Effect Andromeda could have been. But it's just EA just... They scaled it up too big. It just did not need to be that. It's so many people here are celebrating just the size of the world, like Travis Morgan here, just talking about the smaller areas and how refreshing that is. And the fact that people love it, it's it's not... I don't even think it's a matter of overthinking it, but just probably as an industry, they're well, where is it going? for BioWare's sake. Like, oh, open worlds. All right, let's create multiple open worlds. What else are we going to do? That's what people want. It's like, no, they don't. Like, what's the industry's lesson from the Outer Worlds? Just small and gamer-ass gamer games?
Yeah, and one of the convoluted things that it reminded me of when I started playing it is, like the Dark Souls games came out and it kind of felt like a reaction to where game difficulty was at the time, and people really embraced it for like, no, this is doing something different that people liked before, and they figured out a good way to do it now, and it turns out people still like that.
Yeah.
And this kind of feels that way for open world games, where it's like they're so bloated at this point, and you have to have all of these like endless side missions that fall into these very distinct buckets and things, and it kind of They just did a different version that's very focused, and it doesn't have to be a game that you're going to play forever.
Yeah.
But I kind of had that same feeling of like, oh no, like this is the kind of open world game that I want to play.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, open the ways in the ways that we want it to be open.
Yeah. Because I feel like I spend a lot of time in video games across the board, like putting a marker on a map and seeing a number on the UI just shrink as I get closer and closer to it. Like, I feel like I just do that so much in games. And the thing that I like about this is, like, I'm still doing that. I'm still watching a number get smaller, but that number starts smaller and it all seems manageable. You know what I mean?
That's
like,
fun,
which I like. It's like, because there have been moments where I've been like, oh, I got this other side mission here. And like in my mind, I'm like, in that, like, I guess you could say like Assassin's Creed mode or something, where I'm like, well, this is probably really far away. Do I want to do this right now? I'm like, oh no, it's not that far. I can just walk over there.
Right.
That's the upset. You can fast travel pretty, like...
Nick Berry says having fast travel points to major landmarks easily accessible and ready to go on map makes me feel like my time is valued. No more running halfway across the map for every single quest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's kind of also speaks to, like, I haven't found a lot of stuff in the world out. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of quests, and I think I'd be more critical of that if there wasn't if the game didn't communicate that it's very clear. Like, just go to towns where we get quests. Everything else around them, or at least so far, has been like, that's where you go to do quests, and towns are where you pick up quests. And I think
there's not much hidden out there.
Yeah. Mason Parker says, I usually play these types of games with the constant fear and thought of missing out. Therefore, I don't like to make decisions that alienates a group that might lead me to not get experience with their story. With the shorter and non-open world gameplay, I found it much easier to say things like, nah, I don't want to go talk to a preacher. And no, I don't want to try to get the people to come back to town. F them all. Has the change in length, lack of open world, changed the way you're making decisions? I guess maybe just like the replayability aspect to some extent of like, oh, I think I'd like to play through this again. And now I will. Wes Pomeroy says, thank God for the limited scope of the game. I don't think I could handle one more AC Odyssey or Fallout 4 100-hour commitment. The size of the worlds and length of the quests in the Outer Worlds are absolutely perfect. Just enough time to enjoy the beautiful environment and have a few adventures before I'm off to the next planet. And how about those environments? If Fallout 4 had this much color, I might have actually cared enough to finish it. What do you guys think about the art?
I think the art direction is really strong. I think on the technical side, it looks a little rough. Like, a lot of the characters kind of have like these weirdly sculpted like faces. And you look outside, a lot of the structures, a lot of textures are really muddy. Like, there's a lot of rough edges. But I think, like, when you take in a town as like from afar, I think it looks very striking in a way that reminds you of Fallout, but you can very clearly see that this is not the same art team.
Right.
And the skyboxes, I think, are really good too.
Did you guys have a thing on Terra 2? Playing on the PS4, almost every person I talked to, their right ear was glowing, no matter if there was sun anywhere near it. Did anybody else have that?
No.
It's so weird. No one wrote in about it, so maybe I'm insane. Let's see. Alexander Sheck says, how does everyone feel about the colors in this game? Don't get me wrong, I like that they went bold and vivid, but at the same time, it seems a bit overwhelming to me. Definitely had to get used to all the brightly colored objects in the beginning of the game. At times, it was a bit hard to focus and discern what was on screen. It can be hard to find the bodies of killed enemies in the environment. I hear you. It's a bit much at times. I'm not crazy about the overall art direction for the game. I like the world and like the tech, which somebody else called out here too. But everything else, it's like.
I think the colors could be slightly less saturated. It feels like a lot of the colors feel unnaturally bright in a lot of spaces, and I think that's just to call attention to them.
I'm sick of these colorful, bright.
No, well, it's like so you can do
more
color.
Brown, please.
I think I like that it is colorful. I just think it's maybe like the way they've implemented those colors. I think makes it look a little bit like. At times, like, everything is a neon sign in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It does feel a little familiar to me, like whether it's reminding me of BioShock or Fallout. Like, it's finding a weird middle ground in there that doesn't feel particularly unique. Like, that's one of those. That's like one of the reasons I had to remind myself in the beginning is like, this isn't a Fallout game. This is not post-apocalypse. Like, I had to think about that, because the characters kind of look like Fallout characters. The environments kind of remind me of Fallout. It's just a little more colorful and like a little more techy. So I it doesn't feel super unique to me, but overall, I think it's solid.
Christopher Lundgren says, I love the skyboxes in this game, and being able to see the neighboring planet so close gives it a real sense of scale. Yeah, that is super cool. Brian Melody says, the only downside I can find at this point is the lack of radio stations to listen to. Time and budget. Sorry to become Obsidian communicating this. Let's see. Dalen Briggs says, is it just my TV or is a lot of the text way too small? It's readable, but I end up leaning forward to make it easier, and I have a 55-inch screen only 10 feet away from me.
Yeah, I've been squinting a lot, and I have the dialogue or subtitles turned on, and I think that too. It's like when I look at it, I have no problem reading it, but I think there's just a little... I went into the options menu to see if it's the kind of thing that you could bump up, which you can't, but it's just a little too small.
Seems like an easy patch, maybe.
Yeah. Sean Mills says, I'm impressed that they invented an entire sport, tossball, that gets mentioned by several characters in the game, and you see several advertisements for it in the world as well.
And weapons that you can pick up, and playing cards, and all that kind of stuff.
Turns out there's a lot of world building happening here.
I think it's Vicar. Well, he's like, you ask him about his skills, and he's like, well, I got into computer hacking, and I'm pretty good at throwing the old toss ball around. I'm like, is that what? Okay, like what is that? Does that serve my ship any purpose at all?
I'm very curious to see if they actually if they have a rule set for toss ball, or if at some point you play toss ball or something.
Maybe if there's like a pre-rendered cutscene with like some heavy metal playing where they show it being played, would be pretty cool.
Wow. Nick Reed says, have you guys noticed the diamond-shaped pupils in everybody? Characters already never break eye contact, and it's made extra creepy by the odd shape in their eyes. No, maybe your pupils are diamonds.
Maybe
Reed?
that's a bug. I had a Half-Life 2 bug back when I first played it where no characters had pupils.
Oh, really?
And I thought it was just a cool, creepy element of the game. But then when I was like halfway through, and I was like, wait, no one has pupils here. What's going on?
Hiram Espinoza says, as an English major and bibliophile, you pervert, I geek out whenever I see any allusions to literature in the games I play. Not even during gameplay.
Hiram, you should play Alan Wake. By the way.
Interesting.
If you want someone to just police officer to yell authors' names at you.
Or Dante's Inferno.
There you go.
But there's a poster for an in-universe serial by Odeon Pictures called Titus Androidicus that caught me off guard during one of the loading screens and had me rolling. The poster features Burbage droids in full Roman costumes, from togas and laurel wreaths to figs and wigs and no hands. If you're familiar with the story, then you're in for a treat. It's a very smart game, Hiram says.
It's a very Futurama-y thing, too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're right. Futurama did it first. Joe Zwok says, the posters on the loading screens are great, but the best one is Dissenters in Our Midst because the villain's helmet says Philosophist. Just love these tiny details. Let's see. A lot of people, actually probably the third most common refrain was people talking about how awesome the music is. Like the title screen music in particular. Yeah, I did not see that coming in any way. It's incredible.
Yeah, that stuck out to me too.
Do you know who did it offhand? Or?
Yeah, let's see.
Because it's like one of those things where it sounded familiar enough where I was like, I bet I would know who this is, but I don't know who it is.
No, I looked it up this morning and I didn't recognize them.
It's not like a Giacchino or anything like that.
No,
right?
certainly not. No. They had done, I think, another Obsidian game right before this, but while the internet's trying to load, I'll figure that out. Victory Nub says the equipment degradation in the game is out of control, and I hate it so much. Why does one solid burst of gunfire destroy my armor?
So you can you can take your junk and break it down to make materials to fix everything, right? Yeah. Okay, because I've been just selling all my junk, and just because you get equipment so quickly, I just swap out for new stuff without fixing my old stuff.
Yeah, and that's another aspect, the entire system of the game that I don't screw around with too much are the mods. I don't know if you guys have been using them much.
One, yeah.
Yeah, it feels like I'm waiting to get really good weapons or armor or something to actually commit those to.
Yeah, but it seems like I am getting a lot of the same weapons all the time, so it just seems like I guess at some point I'm just gonna have to mod one of these and stick with it. Like that's what I've been doing with my armor, where I have like a really strong armor that I just keep repairing and basically feeding everything else I get into it. But yeah, it does feel like I'm like, what is one weapon versus another so far? I found like one revolver that had like a name that I haven't used, but besides that, it's all been like, here's the same pistol you found, here's the same shovel, here's like all these like different weapons that are basically identical. So I haven't like.
It seems like there are certain, like custom weapons or specific weapons that you'll come across every now and then, but the stats don't seem to be that much different, except for that giant science hammer.
Yeah.
Should go get that.
Strange enough, seems like the composer for Outer Worlds is Justin E. Bell, who's the studio audio director for Obsidian. Worked on Stick of Truth, the composer for Outer Worlds, Deadfire, Pillars of Eternity, on sound effects on Fallout New Vegas. Also, you can hear his music on Critical Role, the podcast.
It's good. Good job.
Good job.
Very good.
Let's see. A couple quick beats we haven't hit yet. Xavier Perez just wanted to point out, I love the dialogue with all the shopkeepers. In so many games, conversations with the shopkeepers are simply, look at my wares. Then you buy something or sell something and go on your way. Yeah. Every shopkeeper I've come across so far has been really interesting. There was one in Groundbreaker who talked about how he was the first in his family to pay off his indentured contract and how excited he was to run his own shop, and it made the world feel believable. Not to mention Martin, which we already talked about. Absolutely. Let's see. Here's a fun one. John Barhos says, after a harrowing adventure with some enormous primals on the mining planet of Scylla, I returned to my ship to bask in my successful rescue of Captain Irian. I immediately ran into the storage area workshop to tinker with some new weapons I'd found when I encountered a small herd of woolly cows. None of my crew fessed up to the prank. There was no explanation, just livestock hanging out there in my workshop. The next day, the woolly cows had left. Luckily, Sam cleaned up after them. It was a very strange day.
Is that just a bug?
I don't know. You make it seem like it's not. You think they would have mentioned that. I don't know. Max Stewart has the most important full circle question. Hey, Hansen, Markiafava, Hansen, and Hansen. Thank you. Whatever happened to that guy in the first tunnel? I felt so bad because I took his gun and told him that I would help. Obviously, I got his mates to quickly run to their death against some marauders, but he was never mentioned again, and I couldn't even go back to him. Whilst this character worked well as an introduction to the dialogue mechanics of the game, it made me think that the dialogue wasn't actually that important, since in its first instance, it was entirely negligible.
Yeah, that was a weird
Loose
kind
thread.
of one-off guy that you just kind of meet.
Yeah.
A previous email had mentioned that, and I was like, oh yeah, there was that one weird guy who was just sitting there that I stole stuff from and then left there.
Yeah, I don't wanna spoil
I
the
never
end
thought
boss,
to go back
but-
to him.
It's him.
Yeah. I'm back.
I was waiting here for 20 years.
you had the chance.
It's gonna be like, do you remember me? And I'll be like, no.
The one with the glowing ear? I think I got you, Peg. Hey, that's the Outer Worlds Game Club Part 1, everybody. Way to go.
Yeah.
Thank you to everybody that played along, that wrote in. Judging from those contributions, seems like everybody in the world is playing and loving the game. Like, is there a chance this is Game of the Year?
It's in the discussion.
Yeah,
It's in the
for sure.
discussion.
I don't think it's mine. If you want to get
We'll
ahead
save
of
it.
ourselves.
We'll save that.
Yeah.
If you
I like it,
enjoyed
though.
this discussion, let's see, if you enjoyed watching this discussion, we should say, we're going to do more Game Club discussions in the future called The Deepest Dive. So you can follow us on MinnMax Games on YouTube, or you can support us on Patreon if you want to listen to future discussions. Also, we have podcasts, live streams, everything under the sun. Patreon.com/MinnMax2ends. Help us survive. Dare I say,
The coming winter.
thrive. Oh yes, also we're in an icebox and we need to move to a studio before we all freeze to death.
My fingers are cold.
And you should also mention that's how they can actually submit their
That's right.
own ideas and stuff
And
like
so
that.
if you want to submit for part 2, then yes, back us at the $2 level, but hell, make it the 20, make it the 10, make it the $7.50, whatever you
Whatever,
want.
yeah.
If you back any amount, you can leave a comment. We make a post on the Patreon page about a day or so before recording, so just keep your eyes on that, getting everybody's comments and whatnot. The next discussion, Deepest Dive Part 2 for the Outer Worlds. How about it's November 13th? So we're giving ourselves 2 weeks, because I think this is going to be the big middle chunk of the game. And so the next discussion is going to be everything up until landing at Byzantium. Don't get off the ship at Byzantium. And then we'll save that for the third chunk. So all adventures in the Outer Worlds up until the ship lands on Byzantium. So please think of some very specific thoughts. These have been great, by the way.
Yeah.
Like they were so specific and wonderful. Thank you to everybody that wrote in. But we'll have a post in the future on the patreon.com/MinnMax, 2 N's. And you can leave your comment there. Have we missed anything?
Follow MinnMax on Twitter and Instagram.
Yeah,
all that
MinnMax
stuff.
Games and all social. Please do. Live streams every Tuesday, podcasts every Thursday. So we'll have the MinnMax show going live tomorrow. We'll try and get up early for backers at the $5 tier in the audio version, but otherwise look forward to it on Thursday whenever the video version is done and uploaded and all that stuff realistically. That's it, everybody. All right, stay tuned for
did
part
it.
2 coming up on November 13th. Thanks, everybody.
Ew.
Bye.